Good evening, Seekers. Tonight, we open the final chapter of Book 2 of the Sleep Scholar Archive, the Book of the Cosmos. For many nights, we have drifted through the deep history of the universe, following the first light through the darkness, listening as the earliest stars gathered from silence, burned with impossible brightness, and scattered their ashes into the ancient night. We have watched those ashes become dust and stone and iron and ice. We have watched gravity shape them into worlds until the cosmos was no longer only an endless sea of stars, but a place filled with surfaces, horizons, shadows, moons, and skies. And now, at the end of this book, we begin the long return. Not away from the cosmos exactly, because there is nowhere one can go that is not part of it, but inward, toward the small and familiar miracle hidden inside its vastness. We turn from galaxies to a single spiral arm, from that spiral arm to one ordinary star, and from that ordinary star to one small world turning quietly in its light. There was nothing in the beginning to suggest that this world would matter. It was not the largest, it was not the brightest. It did not sit at the center of anything. Around it, the stars continued their ancient burning, and beyond it, the galaxies moved through distances so wide that no human mind can hold them without turning them into poetry. Yet here, around this modest sun, a planet gathered from the same old materials the universe had been making for ages. The iron beneath its crust had once belonged to stars. The carbon that would one day move through forests, animals, memory, and breath had been formed in stellar fire. The oxygen that would one day fill the sky had been born long before the sky existed. Even the stone beneath future temples, future roads, future ruins, and future hands had its first beginning in the life and death of ancient suns. So, the earth was never separate from the heavens. It was the heavens made close. It was starlight folded into rock. It was cosmic history becoming ground. In its youth, the earth was not gentle. It was a glowing world of heat and impact, a restless sphere where molten stone breathed beneath dark skies, and debris still fell from space in burning arcs. The surface shifted and broke and remade itself, while above it, the young sun rose over a world with no eyes to see morning and no voice to name the day. There were no oceans yet as we know them, no forests, no birdsong, no footsteps in dust, no stories told beside fire. There was only the slow cooling of a planet, the deep pressure of gravity, the pull of a nearby moon, and the first conditions gathering quietly beneath the violence. Over time, the heat softened, the skies thickened, vapors rose and condensed. Rain began to fall across the young stone, not as a passing storm, but as an age of water returning again and again to a world still warm from its making. It fell into low basins and over black volcanic ground. It hissed against stone. It gathered in hollows. It carved the first patient language of rivers, before there were any creatures to hear them. The first oceans were dark and mineral-rich, moving beneath a sky that still belonged to no one. Lightning opened and vanished in the clouds. The moon, larger in the ancient sky than it appears to us now, pulled the waters into powerful tides. Beneath the waves, near vents where the planet's inner fire met the cold deep, minerals rose into strange towers, and chemistry began to move in patterns that had never existed before. Nothing about this moment looked like destiny. No temple bell rang beneath the sea. No constellation leaned down to announce that life had begun. The change was quieter than that, and stranger. In the hidden places of the early Earth, matter began to arrange itself in ways that could endure, respond, and repeat. Molecules formed, separated, joined again, and carried tiny structures forward through time. The boundary between the non-living and the living did not open like a door. It blurred like dawn across water. Somewhere in those ancient depths, the universe crossed a threshold so gently that no witness could have known it had happened. The cosmos, which had once known only expansion, fire, gravity, and stone, had begun to make something that could hold a trace of itself from one moment to the next. Life was still small beyond imagining. It had no eyes, no bones, no hunger as we would recognize it, and no thought. But it carried within it a new kind of possibility. In the dark waters of a small planet, beneath the light of an ordinary star, the universe had begun the long, slow work of becoming aware. Section 2. For a long time, life remained almost hidden. It did not rise from the oceans in a grand awakening, with forests, wings, eyes, and voices arriving all at once. It began in forms so small that the world could change around them for ages, without ever seeming alive. In the dark water beneath storms and moonlight and the slow pull of tides, tiny living things carried their patterns forward through time, dividing, adapting, and enduring inside an ocean that had no witness except life itself. Above them, the earth continued its patient turning. The young sun warmed the seas. The moon moved across the night. Continents shifted in silence beneath the waves, and volcanic islands rose from fire, while the atmosphere slowly changed through the quiet labor of living things. What life released into the air would one day make breath possible, though in those early ages it was not a gift prepared for animals or human beings. It was a transformation, and like most transformations on Earth, it came slowly, unevenly, and at a cost. Still, the world endured. Across immense spans of time, the oceans became places of greater complexity. Cells joined together, bodies formed, shapes learned to move with purpose through the water. Eyes opened in the sea, and for the first time, the universe began to gather light not only as energy, but as experience. That is one of the quiet miracles hidden in this chapter. A star burns without knowing that it burns. A stone rests without knowing that it rests. A wave returns to the shore without wondering why it has come back. But life began to sense the world around it. Turned toward warmth, it moved away from danger. It followed traces through the water, responded to shadow, and carried memory in forms older than thought. The cosmos had not only made matter, it had made awareness possible. From the seas, life widened into new realms. Green things spread across the land, drawing sunlight into leaf and stem. Forests rose where there had once been only stone, rain, and wind. Insects moved through the air. Creatures crossed the wet edges of the world and learned the weight of land beneath them. Great animals came and vanished, leaving behind bones, footprints, and the silence of ages no living memory could hold. All the while, the sky remained above them. The sun marked the day. The moon shaped the waters. The stars returned in their seasons, tracing the same patient patterns over forests, deserts, oceans, and ice. Long before any human being stood beneath them, the heavens were already keeping time, and life, slowly, was becoming capable of noticing. Awareness deepened through senses, bodies, memory, and movement. Creatures learned places. They returned to water. They followed paths. They recognized one another. They protected their young, feared the dark, sought warmth, and dreamed in whatever ancient language came before words. The universe was no longer only expanding, burning, cooling, and forming worlds. On one small planet, beneath one ordinary star, it was beginning to feel its own existence from within. And far above that living world, the night sky continued to turn, waiting for the moment when a creature would look upward and wonder what the lights meant. Section 3. There was a time when the sky had no meaning. It was still beautiful, though no one was there to call it beautiful. The stars still crossed the night in their slow and ancient order. The moon still changed its face above the darkened earth. The sun still returned each morning, pouring light across mountains, forests, rivers, and plains. But meaning requires a mind to receive it. And for most of Earth's history, the heavens moved without witness, like a song playing in an empty room. Then, slowly, something changed. Among the living creatures of Earth, awareness grew deeper and more inward. It did not arrive as a sudden flame, but as a widening space inside the mind. Memory became stronger. Imagination began to stir. The world was no longer only a place of hunger, danger, shelter, and warmth. It became a place of signs, patterns, absences, and questions. There were paths remembered through grass. There were faces known by firelight. There were seasons felt in the body before they could be counted. There was grief and fear and wonder. And somewhere in that long unfolding, beneath the same stars that had watched over oceans and forests and vanished beasts, human beings opened their eyes to the night. They were small beneath it. Smaller than the mountains, smaller than the storms, smaller than the moon that rose above them, and impossibly smaller than the stars scattered across the dark. Yet, in that smallness, something extraordinary happened. The universe, after billions of years of burning, cooling, breaking, gathering, and becoming, had made a creature capable of looking back. A human hand could lift toward the sky. A human mind could remember that the moon had been full before and would be full again. A human eye could notice that certain stars returned with cold weather, or with floods, or with the time when animals moved across the land. The heavens were no longer only distant fires. They became part of earthly life. They marked the passing of nights. They whispered of seasons. They offered a pattern above a world that often felt uncertain below. In the beginning, there were no written calendars, no carved temples, no towers aligned to solstice light. There were only people watching. Watching from cave mouths, watching from riverbanks, watching from open plains where the grass moved under the wind, and the stars seemed close enough to speak. The sky became memory before it became mathematics. It became story before it became science. The bright wandering lights were noticed. The moon's cycle was remembered. The return of the sun after the longest darkness became a promise that could be felt long before it could be explained. In the deep human past, the heavens were not separate from survival. They were tied to movement, planting, hunting, gathering, ceremony, and the quiet need to know when the world was changing. A star rising before dawn could mean the turning of a season. A shadow falling the same way each year could become a marker. A circle of stones could hold the memory of sunlight. This is where the cosmos begins to enter human history. Not as distant space, but as guidance. Not as cold astronomy, but as sacred pattern. The same universe that made stars had made eyes to follow them. The same ancient fires that forged iron had made blood. The same cosmic dust that became planets had become hands capable of placing stones in the earth, and minds capable of asking whether the sky was only sky. And because human beings do not live by measurement alone, the stars became more than markers. They became presences, They became ancestors, spirits, animals, gods, roads, warnings, and doors. Across the world, separated by deserts, oceans, forests, and ages, people looked upward and filled the night with meaning. They saw hunters in the stars. They saw serpents, birds, rivers, fires, mothers, kings, and the dead. They saw order above them and wondered if that order could be brought down to earth. So the first sacred places began to rise from the same old materials the cosmos had made long before human memory. Stone was lifted, earth was shaped, wood was set upright, circles were drawn, lines were aligned with sunrise, moonrise, solstice, equinox, and the slow returning of heavenly lights. The sky was no longer only watched, it was answered. And from that answer came the first doorway into the mysteries that wait beyond this book. Section 4. Before there were cities, there were places people returned to. A bend in a river where the water came reliably after the rains. A high ridge where the horizon opened in every direction. A cave whose walls held darkness, shelter, and painted memory. A clearing where the sun appeared at the same notch in the distant hills when the cold season began to loosen its grip. Long before stone temples rose with names and kings and carved gods, the sacred began in attention. Human beings watched the world, and the world taught them rhythm. The river swelled and withdrew. Animals migrated along paths older than language. Seeds slept in the ground and woke when warmth returned. The moon changed and came back to itself. The sun traveled higher and lower through the year, drawing invisible lines across the sky. And in those returning patterns, early people found something they could trust. To know the season was to survive it. To remember the sky was to remember when to move, when to wait, when to gather, when to plant, when to prepare for hunger, flood, cold, or abundance. The heavens were not distant decoration. They were woven into the practical and spiritual life of the ground beneath human feet. And because the sky returned with such faithfulness, people began to make memory outside the body. A mark on bone, a notch in wood, a stone placed where the light had touched. A circle built where the horizon spoke. These were not merely objects. They were acts of remembering made solid. They allowed a thought to survive the person who first held it. They allowed one generation to leave a pattern for another. And slowly, across the deep reaches of human time, memory began to gather in the world itself. This is one of the quiet beginnings of civilization. Not the sudden arrival of walls, laws, kings, and armies, but the older and softer beginning beneath them all. The wish to preserve meaning. A line scratched into stone, a burial arranged with care. A path walked again and again until it became a road. A fire lit in the same place because something important had happened there, or because people believed something important might happen there again. The world became layered. There was the river, and there was the story of the river. There was the mountain, and there was the spirit of the mountain. There was the sky, and there was the meaning hidden in its lights. From this layering came the first great human mystery. Not the mystery of whether ancient people were intelligent, because they were. Not the mystery of whether they could watch, count, build, remember, and imagine, because the stones themselves still answer that. The deeper mystery is how far back the roots of human wonder truly go, and how much was known, lost, rebuilt, and forgotten before history began writing itself clearly. By the time the first cities rose in river valleys, the human mind had already been shaped by tens of thousands of years beneath the stars. People had already buried their dead with care. They had already painted animals in hidden chambers. They had already followed the moon, tracked the seasons, crossed landscapes, carried stories, honored ancestors, and placed meaning into stone. So when temples finally appeared, they did not come from nowhere. They rose from a long memory. Their foundations reached downward into older rituals, older skies, older fears, and older hopes. A temple was not only a building, it was a way of placing earth beneath heaven. It was a point where the human world could touch the unseen order people believed moved above and beyond them. Stones were lifted not only to shelter bodies, but to shape attention. Doorways faced dawn. Chambers held darkness until a single day of the year allowed sunlight to enter. Towers watched the horizon. Circles gathered the sky into human design. And from these places came calendars, ceremonies, myths, priesthoods, offerings, measurements, and stories of gods who moved with the sun, descended like stars, spoke from mountains, or crossed the waters before the first cities were born. The cosmos had become culture. The stars that once burned in silence had become signs. The stones that once circled a young sun had become monuments. The same matter that drifted through ancient space now stood upright in sacred places, touched by human hands and filled with human questions. At the edge of this final chapter, the journey of the Book of the Cosmos begins to change shape. We are no longer only looking outward into the deep night. We are looking at what the night awakened in us. For every ancient civilization begins with a sky overhead. And every lost world, no matter how buried in sand, jungle, water, or myth, once had people who looked upward and wondered whether the lights above them were only lights, or whether they were trying to speak. Section 5. The first civilizations did not rise outside the cosmos. They rose inside its rhythm. They rose where rivers answered the seasons, where floods came with danger and renewal, and where the stars returned above fields, deserts, mountains, and seas with a patience that seemed almost divine. In those places, human beings gathered in numbers large enough for memory to become architecture, for belief to become ceremony, and for the old attention to the sky to become part of daily life. A village could remember through story. A city could remember through stone. Walls held people together. Roads carried footsteps into patterns. Markets filled with voices. Children learned the names of rivers' gods, kings, animals, ancestors, and stars. Above the noise of human life, the heavens remained calm and unreachable, returning each night with the same ancient question. What is above us, and what does it want? Across the world, the answers changed with language, landscape, and time. In one place, the heavens were an order held by gods. In another, they were roads for spirits or the dead. In another, they were a calendar written in light. The sun might be a ruler crossing the sky, the moon a goddess changing her face, the stars the souls of ancestors, or the fires of beings who lived beyond the edge of the human world. But beneath all those answers was the same human impulse. To look upward and connect, to bring the pattern of the heavens down into the shape of life on Earth. This is why ancient cities often feel as if they were built with one eye on the ground and one eye on the sky. Their temples, pyramids, circles, towers, and sacred roads were not only structures, they were arrangements of meaning, made from stone, labor, fear, devotion, measurement, memory, and wonder. A temple could be a mountain remade by human hands. A pyramid could lift the eye from earth toward heaven. A stone circle could gather the horizon into a place people could stand inside. A buried chamber could wait in darkness all year, until one blade of sunlight entered on the appointed morning and touched the place prepared for it. To us, these things are ruins. To the people who made them, they were living centers of the world. They were places where the visible and invisible touched, where the movement of stars and seasons became ceremony, where priests watched the sky, where farmers waited for signs, and where ordinary people brought grief, hunger, gratitude, and hope into the presence of something larger than themselves. And yet, the more we study the old places, the more they seem to ask us questions in return. How much did ancient people know about the sky? How far did their travelers go? How much knowledge passed from one people to another before it was ever written down? How many times did cities rise, fall, vanish, and leave behind only stones that later generations no longer understood? The evidence does not ask us to believe every strange theory. It does not prove that every monument hides an impossible secret, or that every myth is a coded memory of a lost age. But the ordinary explanation can still feel incomplete, not because ancient people were less capable than we imagine, but because they may have been more capable than we were taught to expect. Some mysteries remain because the past is broken. Wood rots, names disappear, libraries burn, languages die, floods cover settlements, deserts bury roads, jungles swallow temples, coastlines move, stone survives longer than memory, and when memory is gone, the stone begins to look impossible. So we stand before it and wonder. We wonder at megaliths, alignments, flood stories, sky gods, sacred mountains, serpents, star beings, underworld journeys, and golden ages remembered across distance and time. Perhaps some of these patterns come from the shared structure of the human mind. Perhaps some come from living beneath the same sky. Perhaps some are echoes of contact, migration, disaster, and lost teaching. And perhaps the deepest truth is not found in choosing one answer too quickly, but in learning how to remain awake inside the question. This is where the next door opens. The book of the cosmos began with darkness, stars, fire, dust, and worlds. It carried us from the first light to the making of Earth, from Earth to life, from life to awareness, and from awareness to the human gaze beneath the heavens. Now that gaze turns toward stone, toward temples, toward symbols carved in silence, toward ancient cities half buried in sand and jungle. The cosmos has brought us home, but home, as the ancients knew, is filled with mysteries. Section 6. So here, at the edge of the final chapter, we pause between two kinds of darkness. Behind us is the darkness before stars, the ancient silence where the first light had not yet opened its eyes. Ahead of us is another darkness, closer and more human. The darkness inside tombs, caves, buried chambers, lost cities, and forgotten rooms where symbols wait on stone for someone to ask what they mean. The journey has changed, but it has not truly ended. The cosmos is still above us. It is still in us. It is in the iron of our blood, the calcium of our bones, the carbon of our thoughts, and the breath moving quietly through the body as the night deepens around you. The story that began with the first stars did not stop when Earth became a living world. It passed into hands, eyes, memory, and imagination, until the universe became capable not only of existing, but of wondering why it exists at all. That wonder is the doorway. It is the same wonder that lifted the eyes of ancient people toward the stars. It is the same wonder that placed stones in circles, aligned temples with dawn, carved symbols into walls, and told stories of gods descending from the sky, of floods that remade the world, of golden ages lost behind the veil of time. Some of those stories may be myth, some may be memory, some may be both, woven together so tightly that no one living can fully separate them now. But that is the nature of the ancient world. It rarely gives itself to us whole. It comes in fragments, a broken tablet, a buried foundation, a chamber filled with silence, a monument too heavy to move in the imagination, a star alignment that still works after thousands of years, a flood story echoing in lands far apart. The past does not always speak clearly. Sometimes it whispers through stone, and perhaps that is why we return to it. We return because the ruins remind us that we are not the first to ask these questions. Others stood beneath the same sky long before us, with different names for the stars and different stories for the dark, and they too felt the pull of something larger. They too wondered where they came from, what the heavens meant, why the seasons returned, why death came, why dreams carried voices, and whether the world was watched by powers beyond the visible edge of things. The Book of the Cosmos has carried us across the largest stage imaginable, from the first light to the birth of worlds, from stardust to Earth, from life to awareness. But now, as this book closes, the great distance folds inward. The galaxies remain beyond us, but the mystery has come down to Earth. It waits in deserts, it waits in jungles, it waits beneath water, beneath sand, beneath cities built on the bones of older cities. It waits in temples whose builders are gone, in stones whose purpose is still debated, in myths that sound too strange to dismiss and too beautiful to ignore. The next path does not lead farther away into space. It leads backward into human memory, toward the first builders, toward the lost worlds, toward the sacred mountains, star roads, flood legends, hidden chambers, and ancient knowledge that may have survived only as symbol, story, and stone. And as we prepare to leave this cosmic book behind, we do not close it as something finished and forgotten. We close it as a foundation, for every temple stands beneath a sky. Every myth begins inside a universe. Every ancient civilization, no matter how mysterious, was built from the same dust that once drifted between the stars. So rest now at this threshold. Let the stars remain above you. Let the earth remain beneath you. Let the long story of the cosmos settle into silence, and let the next door of the archive wait quietly in the dark. The universe has made worlds. The worlds have made life. Life has made memory. And memory, when it turns towards stone, becomes mystery. Section 7. Before this book closes, linger for a moment with the image of Earth beneath the stars. Not the Earth of maps and borders, not the Earth of cities, names, nations, and roads, but the older Earth beneath all of that. A dark planet turning under moonlight, oceans moving in their basins, mountains standing in silence, rivers shining faintly as they cross the land, forests breathing into the night, deserts cooling beneath constellations that have watched over every age of life. Above it all, the stars remain. They are distant, but they are not separate. Their story is written into everything below them, into the stone of the mountain, the salt of the sea, the red of blood, the green of leaves, and the quiet electricity of thought. We often look up and feel small, and perhaps that is right, but smallness is not the same as meaninglessness. A candle is small beneath the night, yet it changes the room around it. So, it is with awareness. On one small world, circling one ordinary star, the universe became capable of asking questions. It became capable of fear and love, memory and grief, measurement and myth. It learned to count the days, to follow the moon, to wait for the river, to carve the animal on the cave wall, to bury the dead with care, and to gather around fire while the stars burned overhead. The first people did not need telescopes to know the sky mattered. They could feel it. They felt it in the cold turning of seasons, in the return of light after long darkness, in the flood that came when a certain star rose before dawn, in the moon that pulled at water and blood and story. They felt it in the way the night invited both fear and wonder, hiding danger in the dark while opening the mind to distances no foot could ever cross. And so, the sky became part of the human soul. It entered language, it entered ritual, it entered the first sacred places, where stone and shadow were arranged to meet the sun, where chambers waited for one precise morning, where circles held the horizon, and where the movements of heaven were brought into the human world through patience, labor, and belief. This is the final gift of the cosmos to this book. Not only stars, not only worlds, not only life, but the mystery born when life looks upward and understands that it is looking into its own beginning. For the heavens are not merely above us, they are behind us. They are the deep ancestry of matter itself, the ancient source from which every earthly thing has come. When an ancient builder lifted a stone toward the sky, the act was more than devotion, more than architecture, more than survival. It was stardust, arranging stardust in search of meaning. That is where the Book of the Cosmos leaves us. At the edge of a temple before it has a name, at the mouth of a cave before its paintings are understood, the foot of a stone circle before anyone can say for certain why it was made. At the beginning of a human story that stretches backward into myth and forward into every question we still ask beneath the night. Soon the archive will open another book. Its pages will not begin in the birth of galaxies, but in the old places of the earth, where rivers carried kingdoms, where deserts buried monuments, where jungles covered stairways, where islands remembered floods, and where stones too large for forgetting still stand against the sky. There we will walk more slowly among the ruins. We will listen for what ancient civilizations believed, what they built, what they feared, what they measured, and what they may have lost. We will follow the symbols, the alignments, the flood stories, the star maps, the sacred mountains, and the strange questions that gather around the edges of history. Not to prove every legend true, not to turn mystery into certainty before it is ready, but to stand honestly in the place where evidence, imagination, memory, and wonder meet. Because the past is not silent, it is only quiet. And the farther back we travel, the more carefully we must listen. For now, let the cosmic story settle. Let the long road from darkness to stars, from stars to worlds, from worlds to life, and from life to wonder become soft in the mind. Let the night outside your own window join the night above the first oceans, the first forests, the first fires, and the first temples. The Book of the Cosmos is almost closed, but the sky it opened remains. And beneath that sky, waiting patiently in stone and shadow, the next mystery has already begun. Section 8. And now, Seekers, the final lights of this book begin to dim. Not because the cosmos has ended, and not because its mystery has been solved, but because we have followed this path as far as it was meant to carry us. We began in the ancient dark, before stars, before worlds, before any eye could open beneath any sky. We followed the first light as it spread through the young universe. We watched matter gather, burn, collapse, and scatter itself into the deep. From that scattering came the ingredients of everything familiar. Dust, stone, water, breath, blood, memory. And here, at the end, those ingredients have found their way into us. It is a strange and beautiful thing to imagine that the story of the stars did not remain distant. It did not stay locked in the heavens, shining beyond reach. It entered planets, it entered oceans. It entered the first living cells hidden in the dark water of a young world. It entered bodies, senses, dreams, songs, burials, temples, calendars, and myths. The universe did not only make places, it made witnesses, and every witness carries the cosmos quietly within them. When you look at the night sky, you are not looking at something foreign. You are looking toward the older chambers of your own history. The stars are not merely lights above the world. They are reminders of where the world came from, and of how long the road has been from the first fire to the first question. For ages, human beings have stood beneath those lights and felt something they could not fully explain. The feeling may have changed its language across cultures and centuries, but the shape of it has remained. Awe, fear, wonder, longing. The sense that the visible world is not the whole of reality, and that beyond the familiar edge of life, there is something vast enough to humble the mind and beautiful enough to keep it searching. That search has many names: science, myth, religion, philosophy, magic, memory. All of them, in their own way, begin with the same posture. A human being looking outward into mystery, trying to understand what kind of world this is, and what kind of creature has awakened inside it. So as the book of the cosmos comes to rest, it leaves us not with an ending, but with a threshold. Behind us are stars and galaxies, the birth of worlds, the making of Earth, and the long awakening of life. Before us are the old stones of the human story, the places where wonder became structure, where sky became symbol, and where memory became civilization. Soon, we will step into those older rooms. We will walk beside rivers that fed the first cities. We will pass beneath temple gates and stand before stones raised toward the heavens. We will listen to flood stories, star myths, sacred measurements, forgotten gods, and the strange patterns that appear again and again in the ancient world. Some of what we find will be history. Some will be legend. Some will remain suspended between the two, glowing in that uncertain space where the human mind has always made its most haunting questions. But tonight, there is no need to hurry toward the next door. Tonight, let this book close gently. Let the stars above your own world become quiet again. Let the long river of cosmic time drift past without needing to be held. Let the earth turn beneath you, as it has turned for ages, carrying oceans, mountains, cities, ruins, and sleeping hearts through the dark. The first stars are gone, but their ashes remain. The first worlds have changed, but their story continues. The first life was small, but from it came eyes, hands, voices, and memory. And somewhere, long ago, beneath a sky bright with ancient fire, human beings began to wonder. That wonder is still with us. It is here in the room. It is in the silence between thoughts. It is in the night outside the window, in the old pull of the stars, and in the quiet feeling that the past is not finished speaking. So rest now, seekers. The book of the cosmos is closing. Its pages return to silence. Its stars remain above the archive. And beyond them, waiting in stone, shadow, myth, and memory, the next book is already beginning to open.